All right, welcome back to another episode of No Whole Time. Today, we're excited to have another guest. We're at the Reuters Customer Service and Experience in San Diego, and we have Stacy Sherman with us.
Hi, Stacy.
Hello, so glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us. We did some research to learn about who you are and all the amazing things that you've done in your professional career. And I really get a kick about learning about what people do on their non-professional side. What do they do for fun? Because I think that helps us understand what drives their whys, right? And so, speaker, author, advisor, podcast host, backgammon, and pickleball enthusiast. Did I miss anything?
LinkedIn Learning. I have a course that launched in February and another one's coming this summer.
Awesome. So Brian's here with us, and here I have two things I want to talk about first, and then we'll just see where the conversation goes. I did student teaching in Austin, Texas, and Mr. Gillian was my teacher advisor, and he had been to Turkey, and so he brought home a backgammon set from Turkey, and it was really cool because in between lunches we would just play backgammon. So I developed an obsession with backgammon. Tell me about yours. How did you get into it? Why do you like it? I know that there's a story.
Oh, there's a lot of stories. So I grew up in a family of game players. There was backgammon, there was bridge, there were options traders, and blackjack. And so while most kids went to Disney World, I went to Las Vegas about 20 times a year. And well, backgammon in itself is one that they taught me very much in depth to how to play. And so as a kid, my family would bring me to play in tournaments internationally. So if you think about, there's a movie, I forget which one it is, a chess player that's very popular on TV, but I can't.
Queen's Gambit?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. So when I watched that, it brought me back to me as a kid.
Flashbacks.
And just like being at the table and being really a genius in its own way at that age that I was playing. And so, yeah, I love the game, and it's a skill that you don't forget. And I learned a lot about luck and strategy.
Right. Always knowing what's going to come next, what you do if they do this. And
Yeah. I mean, there's right moves, there's wrong moves, there's chances, and that's life.
Yeah.
But the one fun fact is I used to go to Wimbledon, and the players at that time, they're really old players now, but at the time, Agassi and Chris Evert and all of them, McEnroe, they would play backgammon in the players' lounge when it was raining. So when they had to stop the game, and because my family member used to rent out flats in England to the players,
Yeah.
we had an inn, so we would go into the players' lounge, and they literally, not with me, but
Yeah.
I was in the players' lounge watching them play backgammon, and that was what they did to pass time. And I remember pinching myself saying like, oh my God, this is really happening.
Right.
So it was fun.
So all those names don't feel that old. I think that just means we're getting old. At least I feel that way anyway. Because I'm like, I wasn't Agassi just anyway.
Yeah, but you know what? Some of those, especially McEnroe's playing pickleball.
That's right. I did hear that.
Yes.
So
good transition. I want to ask you a question. Who was the best of the backgammon players in those rooms then?
Oh, I mean, I won some, I lost some, but they were definitely a lot older than me.
Yeah.
So there
makes
was no
sense.
kids in the room.
Yeah.
I don't even know how I was in the room, but
That's
I
cool.
was.
Cool.
I was more than in the room.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So let's transition into pickleball. Our CFO is also really big into pickleball. And in the conversation we had last week, you talked about how it's really transformed your life. Tell us about it.
Absolutely game-changing, and no pun intended. So last year at this time, about March, the corporate world and I separated. So that's all I knew is corporate. And so decided to go out on my own and take a gap year and see what it would be like to be an entrepreneur. Well, with that said, I was going through major transition, and figuring out, who am I? What am I professionally outside of corporate? That's all I knew.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine said, come play pickleball. And I said, wouldn't let me say no. Just go get your badge. Come on. Well, that was it. I never stopped playing from that moment. And I say it's game changing because, one, it brought me a social life right when I needed it. I was also going through different friendship changes and professional changes. And so it brought me a social life. We were laughing at ourselves, laughing with each other. And I started to have a reason to just keep going and do something different. And to this day, when I play, now it's over a year, there's a metaphor to life when you miss one ball. It's like one ball at a time. Then the next ball, you do it better. You do it differently. You learn from your mistake every single time. And it really helps me in my life, but came at the right time for sure.
Cool.
There's a Netflix show, I think it's called Blue Zones, if I'm not mistaken, that talks about not only just activity, but like social surroundings. And so Blue Zones, the concept is there's certain parts of the world where they live past 100. And I think one of their biggest pieces is exactly what pickleball just told you, which is activity and just being around social and friends and people with positive energy. It helps you live longer. Do you feel the same way? Obviously you do if it changed things for you.
Well, you said something that I didn't, and I want to emphasize that, the positive energy.
Sure.
That is absolutely why I am addicted to the game and to the people and the camaraderie. And quite honestly, at my age, which is not so young, who makes 20 friends at this time? And I have from pickleball. So, and it's something you can do wherever you go, that you get excited, like, oh, you play? Let's go play. You can play with anybody. And it's just so enjoyable.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What I really like about pickleball compared to tennis is that I feel like tennis is, you have to have some sort of experience with tennis to have an enjoyable game, and you need this big space and all that stuff. And, we travel a lot for work, and you can just find those courts anywhere. My favorite court I've seen is down in the financial district in Lower Manhattan, next to a Dwayne Reed or a pharmacy. There is a 30 by 30, and and you can rent it, like you can just book it, and then it's just down there, and it's in the middle of Manhattan, 2 little pickleball courts.
Well, with that, so my son lives in New York, and he's lucky enough to have pickleball at his building, but there's other places that you have to bring your own net and pay.
Yeah.
So that's New York for you.
Yeah.
What got you into like where you are today? I mean, you said make a big change. Like, let's talk a little bit about your history. Where you came from, corporate world. What did you do? How'd you get here? Why CX? Let's pick on some of that, if you don't mind.
Oh yes, corporate's all I've known, and it's strange to be out of the corporate world where there's true blue sky. There's no boundaries. And there's no organizational box that I can't leave that box. That's all I know. I'm used to the box. So it's very strange that first year out, I'm just starting year 2, to get used to the non-box. Luckily, and I hope everybody listening understands that, do your passion projects before you know you need them. Because I worked at a BPO. I worked at Verizon, AT&T, Schindler Elevator Corporation, with Martha Stewart Crafts. I mean, you're talking B2B, B2C, all different companies. And luckily, I was blogging and podcasting and speaking when I was in a corporate brand. So obviously, I was kind of told more of what you can say and do versus now. Yeah. But I did it not even monetizing anything. It was because I loved to share the knowledge, and I want people doing CX right, not just talking about it. So it was a passion way long ago. It turned out, after a very crawl, walk, run approach, that here I am now, and actually turned it into my livelihood. And actually the business of speaking and influencing is now my career. But I couldn't have planned that. Just start before you know. Why? Because if you're doing what you love and love what you do, as we know Simon Sinek says, it's true. It doesn't feel like work.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That's good advice.
I was going to ask you, how many podcast episodes have you done?
So my own show, 130, just launched with Seth Godin on Monday,
That's
if you know
great.
who he
I
is.
watched it.
So he's a real change agent, and I loved every second of his mind.
I got transformed on his glasses.
Oh, yes.
Those were awesome, by the way. Those were fantastic.
Absolutely. So 130 of my own show and many great ones in the pipeline. And then I was a guest on over 50 shows before I started my own.
Yeah.
Which is another tip for people is be a guest, even if you don't want to host your own, because you do get known. And if you're seen as authentic, it really is great personal branding and for your company.
I don't want to put you on a I want to ask you what's your favorite of the interviews. Those are fantastic. But I would love to know what's the topic you like most talking about in all of your 150 that really just kind of always either has a theme or like this was the thing. Like if you don't mind me sharing some of that.
Yeah, my favorite ones really get to the heart, sort of psychology to the business. And what I call humanizing business. So I do bring the AI experts because we know that people want that knowledge. Head of Microsoft Copilot was on, and it's intriguing. I loved it. But when you ask me my favorites, it's the ones that get to the heart of the business. And so one of them was Daniel Pink, who is an author. And he wrote The Power of Regret and how you have to look backwards to go forward. And he's a 9-10 time New York selling best author. Now he's not in the CX field. So some of my best favorites are not CXers, but what I do is I bring it to the business world and have that dialogue because, you know, even when you talk about regret, you can't, if you make a mistake in business or a mistake in customer experience, you have to own it. You have to, you know, full transparency. And so all the things that we talked about, I brought it back to business. So that's the answer is it's not always a CX conversation, but boy, it's relatable.
It's awesome. What you just mentioned, like hit a bell. Something that we talk a lot about in CX is sometimes it is a bad experience with whatever company you bought something or you win something. But the best way to turn a bad experience into an amazing experience is understanding I've made a mistake as a provider or service or selling something. My product was not made correctly and someone, you know, broke it or whatever. It's saying, yep, you're right. This wasn't what you expected and fix it. So one of the themes that we have or something that we do often in our episodes is share either a good or bad customer experience. And we've had from a airline to a coffee shop, a pest control company is one of my favorites. Do you have one that you could share with us?
I'll give you two very short ones because I can't choose.
Okay.
So one is, I'll leave the brand name out of it.
Yeah, we did too. That's
okay. One I will tell because it's a good news story. I like bragging about good ones and shielding the bad ones. So the bad one is I said this on stage today. I don't know if you were in the room, but basically I bought a product online and it didn't fit. And so I went to the local store and I said, I'd like to return it. And they said, no. And they said, sorry, you need to return it to online. And I said, but aren't you the same company? And they said, sorry, you have to send it back. Now, what an inconvenience for me, the customer. Two, talk about culture. What they do is they have different goals, the e-commerce team and the retail team. And I know what that's like because I worked at Verizon. We know there's online e-commerce and retail. And I saw a lot done right. So now I was trained on that whole omni-channel experience. Yeah. So if I go as a customer to a store and they won't take it back, I just am so irritated because the leadership's doing it wrong and not driving that collaboration. Because the retail's like, they get scored and the e-commerce has their goals and they're clearly not aligned.
Yeah.
The second one is a good news story, and this is the company Trader Joe's, and it's a great food market, and it was pouring rain. And so I had already taken all my products, put on the cart, go into the register, and the cashier register sees it's raining and says to me, "I'd love to walk you to your car. I have an umbrella here. I see you don't have an umbrella." And I'm thinking, that's clearly not your job.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, that was after other people helped me find some products, opened the bag for me to taste the food.
Yeah.
And I'm like, don't waste it on me. No, we want to make sure you really love it. Okay, that was after all that.
Mm-hmm.
So turns out it was pouring, and I did generously accept an offer to walk to my car to put my bags in. But that was above and beyond. And so clearly leadership is empowering their people to do that.
Yeah.
I was going to pick, so we just did an episode 20 minutes ago about the role of CXO and kind of the evolving, that title and that role and that focus. That just reminds me of that situation, which I really don't, when we talked a lot about it, it was like, look, CXO tends to have the focus on customer centricity and doing the right thing at the right moment and more or less breaking down silos across the enterprises. It doesn't sound like the e-commerce company and the brick and mortar company have that world, but maybe Trader Joe's. I don't know for a fact, but it reminded me of that piece. So, tell me a little bit about that thought. Like when you think about CXOs and the importance of it, or at least that customer centricity of it, is that the breadth and the detail of it, or is there some other element that maybe we haven't thought of in that world that we should be talking about?
So CX, whatever you want to call them, CXO, CX champion, CX director. I've been all of those, and I believe we are the Elmer's glue.
Mm-hmm.
We are the glue to the organization. We are in charge of breaking silos, even though that's not our job title.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfortunate because there's a lot of CX divisions being cut right now. And at the same time, others are boosting up that important role.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing kind of a mixed bag at this moment. Yet, if you don't have your CX glue, it's not going to happen because everybody does this. Oh, it's your role. Oh, no, it's your job.
Yeah.
And so I literally, every company I've ever worked for, and I'll even come in now and do workshops to say, hey, finance, you have a CX job. They're like, no, I don't. I don't touch the front. I'm not the front line. I don't touch the customer. I said, well, let me explain. If you can't pay your bill, that's a pain point. It doesn't matter that the early on journey was great.
Yep.
And they're like, oh. So I literally will go to every person in the organization and I write about this and I talk about this as you have a CX job, whether you realize it or not, whether it's in your job title or not. And I really believe that. So it's an important role. We are the glue and we stop everybody pointing to somebody else and own the experience, internal and external.
Yeah. This is awesome because you're echoing what we just talked about for 20 minutes. And we agree very much with you.
You made me think of this. So I was talking to a lady this morning at this event and she said, when I came into the business, the first thing I looked at was folks who program the point of sale application, just the cash register. And they're like, we just do it, whatever they tell us. And she's like, no, you have an important job. If you don't do it right, think of all the downstream problems that come around. You don't calculate the price right. You don't make it easier for the cash register to get their job done. You don't think about how easy it is for the employee to do what they need to do. The lines are longer, the people are angrier, the price and revenue's messed up. Anyway, I think that CXO is just an interesting title.
Okay, with that said, let me give you a real scenario that happened this morning. No joke, just like that. So I was hosting the Women in CX breakfast, and it was a lively conversation. But before that happened, before anybody came in the room, there were 3 people. One person was putting out the coffee and the bagels. Another person was a technician helping to hook up the computer so that my slides were on the screen. And there was another person like putting tape down so that no one would trip on the wires. And I said, can the three of you come over here with me for a second? And they're looking at me and I said, I am so grateful and appreciative of what you're doing so that I can be successful in speaking shortly. And they're like, oh, okay, shrugging their shoulders. I said, what does customer experience mean to you? And they're thinking, and they're like, and they both like look up in the air, and I'm like, well, do you own the customer experience? They said, yeah, of course we do. And I literally recorded on my phone exactly what they thought about how they own customer experience that they never really articulated before. So to that point, exactly, we have a chance to make everybody understand that.
Yeah. I agree. And I really like your Trader Joe's example. It's something I noticed before I was in CX. I lived in Austin, Texas, and that's where Whole Foods headquarters are. We lived across the street from their flagship store. And I grew up going to value grocery stores in South Texas. So I go into a Whole Foods and I asked for something, and I expected them to say, yeah, aisle 15. And I said, hey, where are the jalapenos? I don't know. They said, yeah, let me show you. And they walked me all the way across the store onto the aisle, got down and said, are these the ones you're looking for? And so it's the same thing, right? They probably have a CX leader that says it's not tell them where they are, it's show them where they are, ensure that they're getting what they need. And I was just blown away that this person walked across the store to show me a $2 jar of jalapenos.
Yeah, the Starbucks CEO just said it last week. That, they had a rough quarter, and he's the former CEO, and he goes, we need to focus on CX because it's experience in the store, it's in the building, it's in the drive-through. It's not about product and it's just about making sure the experience is so important. It's such a vital piece.
But even what you just said about, and the same happened to me, let me walk you to the product. Guess what the good news is? There's no technology investment for that.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
I mean, can we repeat that? Like, CX is not just about high investment. It's about doing the basics right.
Right. I mean, setting the culture that enables those employees to want to do that and know that that's the right thing to do.
So tell us about your breakfast this morning. I'd love to know what the theme was, what the feedback from the crowd was, where you guys took the conversation. You want to share some of that?
Yeah. So just like I do for any workshop, I get data and then bring it to the room. So I went on LinkedIn, my favorite social channel, and I did a poll that said, if we could solve one challenge for women this year, what would it be? One. And I listed 4 choices. And I'll be curious to see what you think. So 1 is pay gap. 2 is lack of leadership roles. 3 is mentorship and lack of. And 4 is life-family balance. So what do you think of 60 people who voted, the number 1 challenge they want addressed if they could?
Is the question what they want to address or what they think women want to address?
Well, good point. So in the room, it was what women want. But on LinkedIn, it's what issue do you, if you could change anything this year, what one would it be?
Yeah.
So 1 is pay gap. 2 is leadership positions and roles. 3 was more mentorship. And 4 is life-family balance.
Yeah.
You want me to guess first?
Well, here's my guess is what other people said, not what I would. Okay, I want to clarify. Is
that just setting yourself up so we don't get in
right?
trouble?
I want to make sure that my opinion is clearly articulated. This is not my opinion. This is just my guess of what others
said. Yeah.
The work, family, life balance.
Okay. What do you think?
I was leaning towards that too, but I also think the leadership opportunities is an interesting one too. Pay gap is you can kind of qualify out pay gap a little bit. I don't know. I'm just thinking maybe leadership would be my guess anyway.
All right. So the answer is that in LinkedIn's poll, it was pay gap.
Okay.
In the room, it was not that.
Really?
So it goes to show that they're all important. And we talked about all of them and what do we do? And the best part of the breakfast were the few men in the room, because it brought out their angle, what they see, and also with the women that have been in these various situations. And something I want to highlight, because this is not just a female thing. The fact is, mentorship's a two-way street. You don't have to wait for formal programs.
True.
You can ask someone to be your mentor. At the same time, you need to follow through. So if you're going to have somebody mentor you, you better do what you said, deliver on that promise, right, of the time they gave you. There were other topics around asking for what you need. Hopefully you're having reviews with your boss, not just end of year.
Yeah.
But that certainly is a good time to ask for what you need, because it's a dedicated discussion. So really advocate. Now, there's another man that was in the room that I loved, and he had a different angle, because he's actually mentoring kids in schools and how they can be leaders. Cool. And a lot of good conversation. And he said, it's really sad because they don't care. And he said, if you want change, you need to start at home.
Yeah. And
his approach is with the parents. And so there's something to be said about that too. As I'm a mom of two, and I've naturally done that, is at home show and advise on how you have to own your experience and voice.
Yep.
There's a lot to say on this topic.
Well, that's really interesting. I want your opinion on what I would have answered, if that's cool.
What I think you would have answered?
No, I'm going to tell you my answer, and you tell me if I'm looking at it incorrectly or advise me, right?
Fair, but no right or wrong.
Right. So Brian and I are both two-time girl dads. We have two girls. My answer would be the leadership, give more opportunities for leadership. And the reason I say that is because I feel that if we have more women leaders, then they could affect change on the other three things. They could help close the pay gap, right? If they're leaders and setting salaries for their company, they could do that. They could help mentor people and then build cultures that would help provide better home work-life balance. That would be my answer.
So I love that answer, and I absolutely could spend hours on that too, having been a female in corporate and how hard it was, like swimming against the tide and going against gravity. And my role model had to do that, my mom. And so I think that is very important. At the same time, I think that companies need more training. And so many leaders are put in position. They've never been a leader before. Yeah. They're thrown in. So how could they be expected to know how to lead? I think there's training. I don't think it's a one and done thing. And I think it's creating support for all humans.
Yeah.
When I say training, there's something I want to share of my own experience. And this is I don't know if it's training or just common sense, but I remember being among male friends who were true friends, every sense of the word, beyond work. I mean, it was work, but they're forever friends. And I remember we'd be joking, and I'm very, I'm liberal, and I'm just kind of go with the flow. And I remember we were talking, and one of them cursed. And then he said, "Oh, sorry, Stacy." And I said, "The fact you're saying sorry is bothering me. Not that you cursed. You should come to my house. There's a lot of cursing going on at home. But the fact that you said sorry made me feel different." Okay. And so if you're going to talk locker room, don't point out that, like, sorry. And so that's something that, like, I don't know if you train that or it's just sensitivity that, like, treat me as equal, because when you say sorry, now I get there's a respect factor, but then just don't say it.
Right.
That's my example of how equality can be real without, this is not pay, this is not, formality. This is just, hey, if we're shooting the breeze.
Treatment.
Treat me like you, or just don't say it, because I felt so awkward when it said sorry. And I'm like, okay.
I can see that. I can see that. So we talked about women leaders. This is a good segue. You play a role in women leaders making a difference. Can you share about what you do and what that group does?
Yes. So this is a LinkedIn community. It is not advertised on purpose. Mm-hmm. It's meant to be authentic, and it's meant to be no selling, pure peer-to-peer support. Mm-hmm. And I started it literally with only me in the group, wondering if anybody will come. And now we're close to 3,000. It started because I was working at a elevator company, and you can imagine that with mechanics, there are not many women. So I was lucky enough to be in a formal women's leadership group to help bring more women into leadership, and in a male-dominated global company. And so when the leadership program was done after 9 months, I'm thinking, okay, now what? Like, we're not going to be coming together anymore. Like, now what? I'm kind of on my own. Yeah. So I said, you know what? I'll start a community outside of here, and let's continue the dialogue. And so that was why I did. So at the time, it was just my colleagues. And then over time, people left the company, and I did. And so now it just grew. And it's not monetized. It's just purely a place for camaraderie. And people have told me I'm the only moderator. And I'm actually slow at moderating because so many people are posting and asking to come in. And the truth is, especially the posts, I don't want controversy in the way of, not nice. I don't want selling. So I myself go through every post until it's approved to keep the authenticity. I don't want male bashing. I don't want selling. I don't want politics. So that's what it is. And maybe at some point I'll turn it into something. And in the meantime, I'm getting invited to events to host these conversations.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome.
You mentioned your mother a little bit ago. I'd love to know more about her. What influences you? What'd she do? Do you mind sharing a little bit about your mom?
Yeah. So my mom, I grew up seeing my mom, one of the first women on Wall Street. And I remember going to the American Stock Exchange in New York, and she was among the only women. It was so, I didn't think about it then. I reflect on it now. I was a little girl. Mm-hmm. And I do remember that all the men, she's petite like me, so all the men were picking her up. You're doing all the hand signals as you see in the movies, right? And everybody's screaming. She actually had to take voice lessons to be able to yell and be as loud and as tone, like the men.
That's awesome.
And she's my 50th podcast show. So if anybody wants to listen to it.
You had your mom on?
I did. So she talks about
that's cool.
all that she had to go through at that time. But here's the thing. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, because my grandparents, her parents, this was unheard of, my grandmother was an accountant and my grandfather stayed back to let her go get her degree. Mm-hmm. Women at that time stayed at home, or they were nurses. Nothing wrong with that. But you could see the generation passed down. So my mom and all 4 girls were accountants, certified accountants, and my grandparents. But my mother left it to go to Wall Street, and my other aunt left it to go to the music industry.
Man, that's brave.
Resilience.
Walk into a lion's den.
That's what I learned.
Into that space.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. We want to do another episode where we jump into a lot more of CX stuff. We normally, when we have a guest, we like to learn about them. I think you've shared some really good things that has helped us understand your why. So let's wrap this episode, and then we'll jump into some more CX stuff in our next one. And Brian is our designated rapper. He likes to.
I'm a rapper?
Yeah.
I'll start with you. Do you want to share in your podcast for our listeners in case they want to join and subscribe? Where can they find it?
Yes, so my entire being of my articles, my speaking, and my course, and my podcast, doingcxright.com.
Thank you. For us, mosaics.com/podcast. You can also continue the conversation. Look at the wrong camera. You can continue the conversation at LinkedIn, and we will be back with Stacy. Don't miss part 2. We'll be back here shortly. Thanks.
Sorry, I'm looking down at this. I'm just looking at notes.
Yeah,
I want to ask.
I can't see your notes, so I have no idea what you're doing.
Just stare at the floor.
Okay, I literally did not see your computer.
Well, that's why it's there. That's why
good.
it's there.